Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Bishnu Prasad Paudel has indicated that the government will not backtrack on the take-and-pay provision. In a meeting with private investors, Finance Minister Paudel claimed that take-and-pay would have no negative impact. He also dismissed the assertion that this policy would deter investment, calling such claims false. Previously, Paudel himself had expressed confusion over how the take-and-pay provision was introduced. However, his recent support for the policy has led energy sector investors to believe that the proposal originated from the CPN-UML, his party. The government formed by the two major political parties has included in the budget that power purchase agreements, PPAs, for run-of-river, ROR, projects will be based on take-and-pay. Investors claim this provision was introduced by the UML without informing the ruling coalition partner, the Nepali Congress. The Ministry of Energy, led by Congress Minister Deepak Khadka, is not in favor of take-and-pay. Khadka has publicly stated that he was unaware of the inclusion of such a provision. Including take-and-pay in the budget raises concerns about financial management, he said during a public event. Don't panic, go ahead with investment. This proposal didn't come from the Ministry of Energy, and we are in discussions with the Ministry of Finance to amend it. Minister Khadka reportedly called Hitendra Dev Shakya, Executive Director of the Nepal Electricity Authority, NEA, after noticing the phrase take-and-pay in the budget. Shakya, too, said he had no knowledge of how the clause made it into the budget. I heard about take-and-pay in the budget but have no idea how it got there, Shakya said. Even the minister inquired how it was included. We need to understand whether the Ministry of Finance added any conditions. This implies the Ministry of Finance inserted the provision. The private sector also suggests that the take-and-pay policy aligns with UML's party agenda. On Sunday, the Independent Power Producers Association of Nepal, IPAN, met Finance Minister Paudel and requested an amendment to the provision. Producers argued that this clause would severely hinder further investment and demanded immediate correction. However, Paudel reiterated that the budget provision would not create any obstacles in electricity generation. The private sector claims that under take-and-pay, banks will not invest in hydropower projects. Observers say Paudel's reluctance to revise the clause suggests that it wasn't an accidental inclusion, typo, but rather a deliberate move by the UML. IPAN President Ganesh Karki stated that while the proposal did not come through official channels, it was introduced into the budget via political influence and connections, posing a threat to the energy sector. If this proposal isn't amended, it will destroy the energy sector. If the sector collapses, so do its producers. They'll either have to surrender or start protesting, he said. The private sector accuses the government of trying to dismantle the rapidly growing electricity sector. Even as Nepal begins exporting electricity to neighboring India and Bangladesh, the private sector claims the government is systematically introducing barriers to derail the sector. They argue that provisions such as take-and-pay, contingency PPAs with no guaranteed purchase, issuing shares only after generation, 90% net worth requirements, penalties for delayed electricity supply, and difficulties in tree cutting for infrastructure are designed to undermine hydropower. Although there are no objections to other aspects of the budget, IPAN's Senior Vice President Mohan Kumar Dongi said the mention of take-and-pay has deeply discouraged project developers who have been waiting since 2018 for PPA approvals. Speaking at a recent IPAN gathering, Dongi indicated that the proposal came directly from NEA. We pressured them to open PPA for 4,965 megawatts, and it was opened accordingly, he said. Then conspiracies began, claiming that if such PPA is signed, NEA will go bankrupt. Dongi said a clause in NEA's board meeting decision regarding PPAs included take-and-pay. There were 4 points in the meeting. Clause D mentioned take-and-pay, he explained. He also mentioned that the NEA decision was later included in the finance bill. When we met the finance minister, he said he would consult using data from the energy sector, said Dongi. That led us to suspect he meant consulting with the NEA's MD. Dongi drew parallels with how flourishing industries like carpet and garment were previously shut down, suggesting that the same fate now awaits the energy sector. This didn't happen overnight, he said. There are planned moves like locking promoters' 33% shares, banning IPOs before power generation, preventing projects worth 20,000 megawatts due to one Supreme Court verdict. And now stopping another 17,000 megawatts by enforcing take-and-pay. According to IPAN Vice President Uttam Blan Lama, the private sector isn't even granted trade licenses, and the take-and-pay provision could push the entire energy sector into crisis. He argues that bringing in take-and-pay without allowing private electricity trading is illogical. IPPEN's Deputy General Secretary Prakash Dulal said that while take-or-pay guarantees payment regardless of electricity purchase, which secures investment, take-and-pay destroys the investment climate. If implemented, take-and-pay will negatively affect Nepal's hydropower sector and the overall economy, he said. NEA is the sole buyer of electricity. This policy eliminates market certainty. He added that if NEA doesn't purchase electricity, private producers have nowhere else to sell. As a result, banks hesitate to invest due to increased loan default risk. IPPEN claims take-and-pay endangers PPAs for around 17,100 megawatts of projects currently in various development stages. An investment of nearly 65 to 66 billion rupees in these projects is at risk. Whose interest does take-and-pay serve in destroying the hydropower sector? Dulal noted that hydropower projects have created thousands of jobs, and now government policy could destroy them. A study shows that 1 megawatt creates jobs for 100 people for 2 to 3 years, and after completion, 10 people get long-term employment, he said. Take-and-pay will halt project construction, resulting in massive job losses. He also pointed out that industries like cement, steel, and logistics directly rely on hydropower construction and will also collapse if the sector fails. Former Secretary Madhu Prasad Bedawal argued that as long as private firms lack electricity trade licenses, take-and-pay cannot attract investment. NEA is the sole buyer and seller. So, how can banks lend under take-and-pay? He asked. If private players had buying/selling rights, this policy wouldn't be problematic. He emphasized that unless the private sector is allowed to trade electricity, take-and-pay shouldn't be implemented. Nepal's 2001 hydropower policy had proposed ending NEA's monopoly over generation, distribution, and transmission. The government talked about unbundling NEA, but no real progress has been made. A bill to give the private sector electricity sales rights was tabled in Parliament but remains stalled. Without licenses for electricity trade and transmission, the private sector is forced into a monopoly buyer system. In this situation, investors warn that the take-and-pay policy threatens the entire future of a promising sector.